On April the 21st of 2017, a friend of mine and a long-term coworker passed away. After the initial shock, sadness, and outright denial subsided, I began to remember the fun moments that I'd had with him, and this video is dedicated to him. About 437 years ago, Bobby Weaver, who we all affectionately called the Weave, and I began to work together in the admissions department at Father Martin's Ashley as admissions counselors. As fate would have it, our schedules seemingly aligned for somewhere around 7 years, and as you do with anyone that you are confined to a small space with, we became friends. Right off the bat, I knew I was going to like this dude. His birthday was on Christmas Day, and he seemingly delighted in telling anyone and everyone, patients included, that, as if part of some magnificent trio, he shared a birthday with Jesus Christ and Jimmy Buffett. The perfect blend of humor and near sacrilege was the indication that we were going to get along just fine. Our sports interests aligned as well, as we both shared an unhealthy love affair with the Baltimore Orioles and the Baltimore Ravens. He delighted in telling us tales of going to the games and meeting players like Baltimore Ravens Hall of Famers Ed Reed or Jonathan Ogden. He once recounted a story about how he chased down Joe Flacco after a Ravens game, knocking on his SUV window until Joe rolled down the window, only to have Weave request his autograph and snap a photo of an unsuspecting Joe. The picture clearly evident that the photo was unsolicited, and Joe probably didn't think too much of it. I replay the image of Weave running towards the NFL superstar's vehicle, and I have to chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. The story just seems ridiculous, but alas, he kept that autograph and that picture proudly, and retold the story several times. A similar story emerged as well, only this time he chased down the car driven by then Orioles manager Dave Tremblay, and got a similar snapshot. Yet again, the Weave struck when he snapped a photo of then Ravens tight end Todd Heap in his car. How Weave was never tased or pepper sprayed is quite honestly amazing. He would later dip his feet into the waters of acting. He appeared in the smash hit Netflix show House of Cards, and due to some contract that he signed, he had to keep it relatively quiet. But as soon as the first season aired, he shouted to the rooftops about his appearances. The most notable was when he was seated in a cafeteria setting just behind Kevin Spacey. We never heard the end of his story about being on the set with Spacey. In a characteristically defiant move, he ripped off the back page of a producer's script, and he left the set with a single piece of paper. He knew my love affair with the show, and he gave it to me as a gift. I still have that script with the producer's notes still scribbled on the back. I won't spoil the show, but it happened to be the end of the now infamous Frank and Peter Russo garage scene. A cooler piece of memorabilia you would be hard-pressed to find, and the Weave just gave it to me, solely because of my love of the show. And that's the kind of guy that he was. At work, he showed several of us sports fans a certain websites that, shall we say, was outside of the realm of legality. The website allowed you to stream any sport event in real time without paying a single cent. Only the Weave could have found that site in the first place. Regardless, on slow days in the office, we would stream and listen to the Orioles or a Ravens game, Weave either celebrating or denouncing our team in a hailstorm of profanity. I remember once the Ravens had a playoff game, and Weave conveniently got sick. It was our very busy weekend shift, and we ended up having to call another coworker to help out in place of the ailing Weave. A few weeks later, for some reason, we were talking about cooking or food or something, and Weave slipped up and mentioned that he had had an awesome meatloaf the night of said playoff game. After the conversation, The coworker who had been called in to cover him pointed out the absenteeism as it conveniently aligned with the day that Weave was sick. We were pissed for a time, but we got over it. We did begin to call him Loaf and Meatloaf, which I don't think he ever fully realized why, but I suspect he thought we were making a reference to him looking like the singer Meatloaf or something, which wasn't true, nor did he even look anything like Meatloaf, but we never told him why we called him that either. Fishing. Good grief, the guy could not stop talking about fishing. It came up at least once a day. All these tales of going out into the Atlantic and fishing in the ocean. His work with tourists. Him constantly making fun of their ignorance and their fishing abilities, or lack thereof. He would recount these stories proudly, fondly, and with passion, as any seasoned storyteller would. I myself have no knowledge of fishing, but I would always humor him just by listening. The passion of love of life was captivating, and one of the things that would draw you to him. At work, he and I would have prank wars constantly, mostly innocuous and in good fun. One of the longest running said wars was hijacking each other's computers. When you left the office to go eat or take a break or go to the bathroom, you were supposed to lock your computer. Unfortunately, neither Weave nor I were very good at it. One day, I went to eat, or something. When I returned, Weave had changed my desktop to the band Nickelback, of which he knew I despised as much as a person could hate a band. He laughed maniacally as soon as I made the discovery. The game was on. I changed his desktop to something, he changed my desktop to something, and the exchange would continue. He changed my desktop to a mulleted Billy Ray Cyrus circa 1991, and I changed his to a picture of Tom Brady, or Bill Belichick. Eventually the game evolved to pictures that weren't exactly safe for work, but we continued the prank anyway, despite the complete poor taste. For a time, Weave and I shared a cubicle, and he discovered once a can of Axe deodorant spray that I had stored away in the drawer. You know, in case I was smelling funky at work and needed to freshen up. Well, upon discovering the spray can, he waited until I may have nodded off asleep at my desk during a slow period in the office. I was rudely awoken by Weave, giggling like a mischievous 13-year-old, spraying the contents of the can on me. I smelled, like you would imagine, like half a can of Axe body spray, and so did the office. Our boss told me to never keep spray deodorant at my desk again, because the office had smelled for the next day or so. Personally, I remember how supportive Weave was. Whether it was some blog post that I did or some YouTube video, he was always there. He'd always leave me a funny, usually positive comment. When my old band had a CD release show in Baltimore, he was the only person from work to show up. He caught me after the show in these dorky cowboy boots, and he told me what a great job I'd done, and how he liked my band, which I know was probably not true since we were heavy metal and the Weave usually sided with country music. I made fun of him for the boots, but I was so glad to see him come out to the show. It was a small gesture for me, but it was monumental. It was the job that we did at work that you could really see what kind of a person he was. We worked admitting people who were struggling with addiction or mental health issues. And Weave did the job like a champ. Don't get me wrong, he took long lunch breaks. He would rest his eyes at his desk, often snoring loudly. He'd watch the Orioles game over answering the phone. But with all that aside, when he spoke to a patient, he did so with fervor, with passion, with conviction. He would try with all of his might to appeal to them the virtues and positivity of sobriety, being of sound health mentally and physically. He would take a simple 1-hour admission and turn it into a 3-hour epic escapade, backing up the processes for nursing and irritating them. But it really didn't matter to him. He was delivering a possibly life-changing message to an incoming patient. My coworkers and I would come to make fun of him, calling him Preacher Weave or Priest Bobby, due to the sermons that he delivered to each patient willing to listen. But in all seriousness, he was good at it. He made patients coming in who had no hope in themselves suddenly see a flicker of light and hope. He'd fight with insurance companies whenever they tried to deny a patient coverage, almost going so far as to cuss at them for being a crappy healthcare provider. But he'd restrain himself at the last minute and try to avoid a verbal confrontation. One of my most vivid memories of working with Weave could basically sum up who he was. A woman had called into the facility, and she made no real indication that she wanted to be sober, but she began threatening to harm herself in a drunken stupor. Weave took the call as serious as he could. She continued speaking in generalities, but she continued to imply that she would hurt herself once she got off the phone. Weave kept the distraught woman on the phone, while my coworker Mark and I listened to the other line. The conversation went on for over an hour. The woman going through a gauntlet of different emotions. Weave stayed calm, and he gave her warm, friendly advice. Eventually, after several times of trying to get her information and her not giving it, he was able to get her address under the guise that he wanted to start a file so that she would come into the facility. Mark and I jumped on the opportunity, now having the address, since we'd been on the other line, and we immediately called 911. The police went to her house that night, and they took her to the hospital for an evaluation. I don't think that the woman ever came into Father Martin's, and truthfully, I don't know whatever became of her. But I do know for sure that, at least for that one night, she was safe, because Weave had talked to her for over an hour and a half, not letting her go, and continuing to keep his friendly, compassionate demeanor. And that was Weave. Mischievous, but funny as hell. And when the time came, he could be caring and compassionate. He wanted the best for each and every person. And that's how I'll remember him. For the rest of my days, at least. Rest easy, buddy.